Hollywood's golden age was not only an era of glamorous films and stars, but also a time of outrageous publicity stunts. Studios and press agents would orchestrate fake events, scandalous cover-ups, and sensational gimmicks to promote their actors and movies. Many of these stunts crossed ethical lines, involving deception, shock tactics, or personal humiliation, all in the name of grabbing headlines. Below is a detailed report on some of the most notorious publicity stunts of that era, each with its description, the actors or studios involved, context and motivation, public reaction, and long-term impact on careers or public perception. Lavender Marriages. Rock Hudson's arranged wedding to Phyllis Gates. Hollywood's Golden Age studios not only created on-screen fantasies, they also sometimes manufactured off-screen illusions, especially to hide aspects of a star's personal life that might harm their box office appeal. A prime example of such a stunt was the arranged marriage of actor Rock Hudson to his agent's secretary, Phyllis Gates, in 1955. This was a classic lavender marriage, a union orchestrated to mask Hudson's homosexuality at a time when being openly gay was taboo in Hollywood. Rock Hudson was a rising leading man in the 1950s, known for his tall, handsome, all-American image. Behind the scenes, however, Hudson was gay, and his studio and personal agent were desperate to keep that fact secret. In 1955, rumors about Hudson's private life started circling in gossip columns, and scandal rags like Confidential magazine were preparing to expose Hymned, a marriage between Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates, who conveniently was Wilson's own secretary. The courtship was swift and largely staged. Gates had been seen in public with Hudson a few times, and by November 1955, the two were quietly wed in Santa Barbara. The ceremony was small and kept secret until after the fact, immediately after Hudson said, "I do." Wilson telephoned the powerful gossip columnists Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons to break the news that Hollywood's most eligible bachelor was now a married man. The studio then fed the press a steady stream of wholesome domestic images. Hudson and Gates on honeymoon, in their cozy home life, etc., with fan magazines publishing quotes like, "Marriage has turned out to be all I hoped for," and more. From Hudson. Actors, studios involved. Rock. Hudson was the actor at the center. Phyllis Gates, though not an actress, became a public figure briefly as Mrs. Hudson. Henry Wilson was the chief architect, undoubtedly with the blessing of Universal Studios, which had Hudson under contract. At the time, studios carefully managed star images, and Universal was investing in Hudson as a top romantic star. Also involved indirectly were the gossip columnists, who were co-opted into the plan. By giving them an exclusive on the marriage, Wilson ensured they'd play along and present it in glowing terms, rather than digging further into Hudson's private life. Context and motivation. The context was a Hollywood where image was everything. A gay leading man in the 1950s was considered impossible. Studios feared that if female audiences suspected the heartthrob on screen was not romantically interested in women in real life, it would destroy his romantic appeal and the financial success of his films. Moreover, homosexuality was stigmatized and often equated with scandal or moral deviance in that era. Hudson's clean-cut masculine image had been carefully built, and protecting that illusion was paramount. The motivation, therefore, was to squelch the burgeoning rumors and satisfy the public's expectations. By getting Hudson married, the studio and agent hoped to answer the nagging, "Why isn't this gorgeous man taken?" questions and silence gossip. It was a proactive PR stunt to maintain a fictional narrative of Hudson's personal life, aligning with his screen image. Henry Wilson was known for such tactics. In fact, arranging relationships for his clients was part of his modus operandi. In Hudson's case, the arrangement with Gates was so calculated that Wilson even choreographed their interactions. As one account notes, Wilson choreographed everything from the wedding to the honeymoon publicity. Gates herself later said she truly loved Hudson, but many of their public outings were orchestrated by the press, not unlike scenes in a movie. Censors and Cleavage, Howard Hughes, and Jane Russell's The Outlaw controversy. In the 1940s, an outrageous publicity stunt unfolded around the film The Outlaw and its voluptuous newcomer star, Jane Russell. This stunt, orchestrated by eccentric producer-director Howard Hughes, involved pushing sexual boundaries on screen and then using the resulting censorship battle as a marketing tool. It was a classic example of no such thing as bad publicity. The Outlaw was a Western film featuring 19-year-old Jane Russell in her debut role. Hughes became obsessed with showcasing Russell's physical attributes in the movie. He famously engineered a special bra for Jane Russell to accentuate her figure, a piece of engineering lore that itself became part of the publicity. As Hughes anticipated, the finished film's racy shots of Russell ran afoul of the Hays Code censors. Joseph Breen, Hollywood's chief censor, objected that the girl's breasts are shockingly emphasized in the film. Hughes engaged in a prolonged wrangle with the Production Code Administration, delaying the film's wide release. Rather than shy away from this trouble, Hughes weaponized it for publicity. He leaked and exaggerated the censorship dispute, generating press about how the censors don't want you to see Jane Russell. He plastered cities with provocative billboards of Russell, teasing audiences with lines like, "How would you like to tussle with Russell?" He also staged publicity stills, the most famous being Russell lounging in a haystack, skirt hitched up to reveal her legs, and a sultry gaze, which became one of the most controversial images of 1940s Hollywood. Hughes delayed the general release for years, all the while keeping the hype alive. Russell, under contract, spent 2 years doing press appearances to promote the film, earning the nickname the Motionless Picture Actress, because the movie was tied up by censors while she made public appearances. Howard Hughes was the ringleader, and Jane Russell was the unwitting centerpiece of the stunt. The film initially got a limited premiere in 1943, but didn't get wide distribution until 1946 via United Artists, due to censorship issues. Hughes's production company was behind it. This was not an official studio stunt by a major studio, but it had all the secret love child cover-up, Loretta Young, and Clark Gable's adoption. Not all publicity stunts were about creating hype. Some were about hiding scandal. A famous example involved actress Loretta Young and matinee idol Clark Gable in the 1930s. Their stunt was essentially an orchestrated cover-up of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, a fake adoption story fabricated to preserve their wholesome public images. In 1935, while filming Call of the Wild, the unmarried Loretta Young had a brief affair with her married co-star Clark Gable, which resulted in Young becoming pregnant. At that time, an unwed pregnancy was considered a career-ending scandal. To avoid public disgrace for both stars, Young disappeared from Hollywood until she secretly gave birth, then concocted a plan. She claimed to have adopted an infant girl from an orphanage in 1937. In reality, her own biological daughter by Gable. The studio and her handlers supported this fiction. Young even staged photo ops showing her as a compassionate single woman adopting a baby, which spun the narrative as an act of charity rather than a scandal. Loretta Young orchestrated the cover story with the likely knowledge of her studio and possibly Gable's studio, since Gable was one of MGM's most valuable stars. Gable himself stayed publicly silent and did not acknowledge paternity. The success of the ruse required tight control. Studio fixers made sure the press did not pry too deeply, and gossip columnists were kept at bay by the official adoption story, The Body, Kidnapping. Hoax, Marie McDonald's Gone Girl-style stunt. By the mid-1950s, as television encroached and studio control waned, some actors themselves took extreme measures to generate publicity. One of the most bizarre examples was the 1957 kidnapping hoax of actress Marie McDonald, nicknamed The Body for her bombshell physique. This stunt was straight out of a thriller novel, and indeed may have been inspired by one, involving a fake abduction that spiraled into scandal and suspicion. On January 4th, 1957, Marie McDonald vanished from her Los Angeles home under alarming circumstances. Her mother received a frantic phone call that night from a man claiming he and an accomplice had kidnapped Marie at gunpoint. When police arrived at Marie's house, they found signs of a struggle and a mysterious ransom note in the mailbox. The story gripped the public. A glamorous Hollywood starlet, abducted in the dead of night. Astonishingly, Marie resurfaced the next day, found dazed by a highway. She told authorities an incredible tale. Two strange men had broken in, drugged her, and held her captive in a remote house. She claimed she escaped when the kidnappers became spooked by radio news of the manhunt and released her roadside. She even had minor injuries, bruises, cracked teeth, consistent with an ordeal. At first, the media and public treated her as a victim of a horrific crime. But soon, details didn't add up. Investigators noted that Marie seemed oddly proactive during her supposed captivity. She had managed to call a gossip columnist and her agent while the kidnappers weren't looking, and she gave different versions of events to different people. Police found a novel in her home, The Fuzzy Pink Nightgown, whose plot involves a staged kidnapping of a movie star. Skepticism grew that Marie McDonald had perhaps engineered the entire episode as a publicity stunt. A grand jury was convened to examine the inconsistencies. Ultimately, though many suspected a hoax, no charges were filed. The evidence was inconclusive. Marie indignantly insisted she had truly been abducted, though she later recanted some claims. Marie McDonald herself was the central figure and likely mastermind. By 1957, her film career had slowed, and she was better known for her tumultuous personal life than any recent hits. No studio was directly involved. If anything, studios were embarrassed by the incident. This was a publicity stunt perpetrated either by Marie alone or with a small circle, rather than a sanctioned studio PR event. In fact, one could say this stunt was a desperate attempt by a fading star to generate headlines on her own. Marie had the moniker The Body, and had been in a few films in the 40s. By the mid-50s, she might have felt her fame slipping. It's also possible she had personal motives intertwined with psychological issues. Some accounts suggest Marie had a penchant for drama and might have been struggling emotionally. Regardless, orchestrating a fake kidnapping is an extreme move, implying she felt she had little to lose. She knew the press would swarm to such a sensational story. It was essentially headline bait. Initially, the public and press reacted with shock and sympathy. For a short period, Marie McDonald was on every front page as a damsel in distress who survived a nightmare. However, as contradictions emerged, the tone shifted to skepticism and ridicule. When news leaked that the grand jury found no solid evidence of a real abduction, many concluded it was all a publicity stunt. The court of public opinion can be harsh. Marie went from object of pity to butt of jokes in some circles. Headlines that once read, "Starlet Kidnapped," turned into cynical punchlines about a gone girl caper. Still, because no definitive proof of the hoax was established, some fans gave her the benefit of the doubt. The case remained officially unsolved, which in a way prolonged the mystery. But overall, the sense was that her credibility had been seriously damaged. Hollywood, always wary of the bad press, is likely distanced itself. Producers would think twice about hiring someone who staged a national hoax. Jane Mansfield, the queen of outrageous publicity stunts. No discussion of Golden Age publicity stunts is complete without Jane Mansfield, the 1950s blonde bombshell who practically made publicity stunts her calling card. Unlike others on this list, Mansfield's stunts weren't one-off crises or cover-ups, but a continuous strategy to keep herself in the headlines. They ranged from risque wardrobe antics to shocking public behavior, scandalous, and often deliberately staged. Mansfield's stunts were sometimes playful, often provocative, and occasionally backfired. but they made her one of the most talked-about actresses of her era. Jane Mansfield orchestrated countless little events to generate press, earning her a reputation as a savvy self-promoter. Some of her most infamous stunts: wardrobe malfunctions by design. Mansfield was notorious for accidentally exposing herself. In January 1955, at a press event in Florida for another star's film, she wore an ill-fitting red bikini. Right on cue for photographers, Jane dove into a pool and her top popped off. The press got photos of her surfacing topless, which caused a sensation. That incident directly led to Warner Brothers, and Playboy approached her with offers, exactly the kind of attention she sought. Similarly, in June 1955, her strapless dress fell down to her waist twice in one night, once at a movie party, later at a nightclub, exposing her bust to onlookers and cameras. Each time, headlines followed. The Sophia Loren dinner photo in 1957. Perhaps Mansfield's most iconic stunt occurred at a Beverly Hills dinner held in honor of Italian actress Sophia Loren. Jane, not one to be upstaged, wore an extremely low-cut gown and ensured she was seated next to Loren. As flashbulbs went off, Mansfield theatrically leaned forward, allowing her ample bosom to spill out of her dress, deliberately exposing a nipple. Sophia Loren's side-eye glare at Jane's chest was captured in a now-famous photograph. The image, with Loren looking appalled at what Mansfield was accidentally showing, was published worldwide and became one of the most talked-about photos of the decade. It was blatantly a publicity ploy. Mansfield knew such a blatant display would steal the spotlight. Publicity for the sake of outrage. Mansfield's bag of tricks also included things like walking down crowded streets in skimpy outfits, appearing at events with her pet chihuahua while wearing only a bikini, and even oddball stunts like becoming the first American actress to appear nude in a mainstream sound film. The 1963 film Promises, Promises. She arranged for photographers on set so that news of her nude scenes made headlines before the film even released. She threw herself a birthday party at a nude beach in 1960. In Rio de Janeiro, during Carnival, 1958, she shocked onlookers by appearing topless on a float. Essentially, no venue was off-limits for a Jane Mansfield stunt, from Hollywood to Europe. She would create a sensation. Jane Mansfield herself was the driving force, though her publicists certainly helped coordinate. In her early career, 20th Century Fox tried to mold her as the next Marilyn Monroe, and likely condoned some antics. Mansfield's first husband was a public relations professional, which might explain her knack for PR. Later, as her film roles dwindled, Jane freelanced her fame through nightclub acts and appearances, so she was essentially her own publicity machine. No single studio was staging these. Mansfield took control of her personal PR, sometimes even against studio wishes. Context and motivation. Jane Mansfield came onto the scene in the mid-1950s when Marilyn Monroe was queen. Mansfield's motivation was to get noticed and carve out her own spotlight as Hollywood's daring blonde bombshell. With a very voluptuous figure and playful personality, she realized early that media attention could be grabbed by giving the press something spicy to print. Her motto could have been, "Make news every day." Whether it was turning up at a film premiere in a skin-tight dress that risked falling apart, or feigning a wardrobe slip, she consciously blurred the line between starlet and publicity seeker. The context was also that, by the late 1950s, the studio system was weakening. Stars had more freedom to generate their own publicity stunts, and Mansfield seized that freedom. She also recognized that controversy kept her name in circulation even if her movies weren't blockbusters. In a sense, Mansfield foreshadowed the modern reality TV-style celebrity who is famous for being famous. One article noted she set the blueprint for today's reality stars through her carefully crafted persona and infamous publicity stunts. Her every move was calculated for column space. The motivation was pure self-promotion, an attempt to stay relevant and bankable through media buzz. She enjoyed the shock value and played the coy, ditzy blonde in public, while actually being quite savvy about media manipulation. Public reaction at the time. Reactions were mixed over the years. Initially, the public was titillated and amused. In the mid-50s, audiences and press found her stunts daring and fun. A kind of naughtiness that pushed boundaries in the Eisenhower era, but could be laughed off. Men's magazines loved her. She got a Life magazine cover and plenty of publicity that painted her as the uninhibited new sex symbol. However, as she repeated the same tricks, a backlash grew. By the late 1950s, mainstream media started criticizing her. A widely quoted editorial at the time chided Mansfield and those like her, saying, "We are amused when Miss Mansfield strains to pull in her stomach to fill out her bikini better, but we get angry when career-seeking women use every opportunity to display their anatomy unasked." This captures the shift in public tone, from amused to annoyed. People were beginning to see the stunts as desperate and crass. Indeed, Mansfield's constant overexposure led to diminishing returns. Fox dropped her after a while, partially because her negative press started overshadowing her actual acting. Designers refused to work with her for fear she'd deliberately embarrass them by popping out of their gowns. By the early 1960s, some venues literally put up signs like, "No Jane Mansfield allowed," to avoid the kind of spectacle she might cause. She began to symbolize the tacky side of celebrity publicity. Yet, notably, she maintained a strong fan base and continued to headline shows. Some segments of the public still loved that she gave them something to talk about. Tabloids continued to eagerly cover her outrageous exploits, right up until her untimely death in 1967. Rudolph Valentino's over-the-top funeral spectacle, 1926. When silent film icon Rudolph Valentino died suddenly at age 31, his untimely passing was a genuine tragedy. However, what followed became one of Hollywood's most morbid early publicity stunts. Valentino's manager and a funeral home director decided to turn the funeral into an extravagant media event, hoping to cement the actor's legend and draw enormous crowds. The funeral was held in New York, where Valentino's body lay in state for days. Tens of thousands of mourners lined the streets, and rumor has it that professional actors were hired to pose as hysterical fans, collapsing and weeping to add drama. The chaos reached such extremes that police had to form barricades, and some starstruck admirers reportedly fainted in the crush of onlookers. Funeral organizers also encouraged newspapers to print stories painting Valentino as a romantic martyr, fueling a frenzy of grief. As a finishing touch, a mysterious lady in black repeatedly arrived to leave roses at Valentino's crypt, a gesture that many suspect was orchestrated to keep the media spotlight burning. While much of the public genuinely mourned Valentino, critics derided the spectacle as tasteless exploitation. Some attendees felt manipulated, sensing that the overblown theatrics overshadowed the actor's genuine legacy. Still, the stunt worked to an extent. Valentino's mythic status soared posthumously, solidifying him as a legend of the silent screen. Even decades later, Hollywood historians note this funeral as an early example of public sorrow being turned into a publicity opportunity. It was a potent reminder that, in Tinseltown, even death could be stage-managed for maximum hype and, arguably, maximum profit. The Great Search for Scarlett OHara, 1937 to 1938. Producer David O. Selznick's quest to cast Scarlett OHara in Gone with the Wind became a year-long publicity campaign that might best be described as a nationwide talent hunt mixed with studio showmanship. After acquiring the film rights in 1936, Selznick publicly announced he'd scour America to find the perfect actress. The idea of an all-out casting search was far from new, but Selznick elevated it to a marketing art form. Over the course of 1937 and 1938, The producer deliberately leaked stories to fan magazines about untested starlets auditioning in droves. Studios trotted out their contract players, and amateurs queued in lines outside casting offices, convinced they might become the next Southern Belle sensation. Reporters wrote breathless updates about each new contender. Paulette Goddard, Joan Bennett, even Lana Turner, fanning public curiosity. High-profile screen tests were staged in front of press cameras. Selznick fueled speculation by hinting that maybe a complete unknown would be discovered, rousing hope across small-town America. Behind the scenes, Selznick already had some established Hollywood names in mind. Yet, by keeping the rumor mill churning, he turned the casting process into a massive promotional event, long before a single frame was shot. Fan magazines published weekly Scarlett search columns. Radio segments debated the best candidate. This not only kept Gone with the Wind in headlines, but also allowed Selznick to gauge public opinion on various actresses. Ultimately, British actress Vivien Leigh snatched the role. The discovery of Leigh at a New Year's Eve party was the final dramatic twist in the saga. By then, the film was the most talked-about project in Hollywood, and audiences were primed for its eventual release. Critics later pointed out that the stunt blurred the line between authentic casting needs and showy spectacle. But as a preview of the movie's epic scale, it was undeniably effective. Marilyn Monroe's nude calendar, scandal turned PR triumph. 1952. Before Marilyn Monroe became the most famous blonde bombshell on Earth, she was a struggling model in the late 1940s. She once posed nude for a photographer to earn a modest fee, money she said she desperately needed for rent. Years later, in 1952, those nude photos resurfaced and threatened to create a damaging scandal for the then rising starlet, who was carefully being marketed as a fresh-faced ingenue by 20th Century Fox. Initially, the studio panicked at the thought of a lurid pin-up controversy. Conventional wisdom said an exposed star's career could be finished. However, Monroe did something unexpected. Instead of denying it, she admitted to posing nude, explaining that she'd been broke and had no other choice. Her candid, sympathetic confession, delivered in a mix of wide-eyed vulnerability and confident acceptance, surprised the press. Sensing an opportunity, Fox shifted gears and turned the potential scandal into a triumphant underdog story. Here was a relatable young actress, struggling to pay rent just like anyone else, who had done nothing worse than pose for tasteful photographs. The public responded with warmth and curiosity rather than moral outrage. Newspapers played up Monroe's sincerity. Men's magazines championed her as a gutsy, honest personality, and women sympathized with her survival story. The controversy quickly snowballed into a wave of publicity, with Marilyn's burgeoning stardom skyrocketing. Fan mail soared. Her films saw spikes in attendance. Meanwhile, the existence of the calendar became a sort of open secret, one that only boosted her mystique. In the end, the nude calendar scandal was no scandal at all, but rather a masterstroke of PR. Monroe's willingness to be transparent, and Fox's pivot to embrace, rather than bury the story, transformed negative press into the very platform that launched her into Hollywood's A-list. It remains a textbook example of how a deft publicity strategy can turn potential disaster into career gold. Joan Crawford's Name the Star contest, 1925. Before she was Joan Crawford, she was a young dancer-actress under contract to MGM, named Lucille Fay LeSueur. Studio executives found LeSueur awkward and unglamorous, so they devised a publicity stunt that doubled as market research. A public contest to rebrand their budding star. Movie fans were invited to submit new stage name suggestions, with the winning entry guaranteed a small cash prize and the thrill of naming a future Hollywood sensation. Magazines and newspapers ran stories urging readers to mail in entries, stirring nationwide curiosity. Who would get to rename this bright-faced newcomer? Thousands of suggestions poured in. Eventually, Joan Crawford was declared the winner. By the time the final decision was announced, filmgoers felt a sense of personal investment in Lucille's transformation. This stunt served multiple functions. First, it built early buzz around a relative unknown, signaling that MGM had big plans for her. Second, it conveniently tested which names resonated most with the public, giving the studio a built-in focus group. Third, it positioned the actress as a sort of people's choice, tapping into fans' excitement that they had shaped her future. And perhaps most importantly, it solved MGM's problem of an unmarketable last name. Lucille had joked it sounded like sewer, hardly the connotation a glamorous star needed. In the short term, the contest was a minor hit in the fan press, generating curiosity about this star in the making. Long term, it gave birth to one of Hollywood's most enduring names, Joan Crawford, who would go on to Oscar-winning fame and become one of the industry's biggest box office draws. The Name the Star gimmick proved that even something as basic as an actor's name could be leveraged as a major promotional event in the Golden Age. Early Hollywood's sensational PR, fake kidnappings, and a lion in a hotel. One of the first great Hollywood press agents, Harry Reichenbach, set the tone for outrageous stunts in the 1910s and 1920s. Reichenbach was legendary for his sensational publicity schemes designed to generate headlines. Two of his most infamous exploits were the lion in the hotel. To promote a Tarzan film, Reichenbach rented a suite in New York's Hotel Belclair under a fake name and installed a full-grown lion in the room. He even ordered 15 pounds of raw beef to the suite, so that when hotel staff and police inevitably investigated, they found a lion feasting inside. Reichenbach calmly explained that the big cat was the star of an upcoming Tarzan movie premiere. Context and motivation. The stunt was meant to shock the public and drum up curiosity about the film by creating a wild scene. Public reaction. Newspapers had a field day reporting the story of a movie promoter with a pet lion, and the film got free publicity. Long-term impact. This caper cemented Reichenbach's reputation as a master of ballyhoo and showed studios how spectacle could translate into ticket sales. It also hinted at ethical risks, but in this case, no harm was done beyond fright. Fake kidnapping and daring. Rescue. Pushing ethical boundaries further, Reichenbach at one point staged a fake kidnapping of an actress who was set to appear in one of his films. He didn't stop at the abduction. He orchestrated a mock police chase across the Mexican border to rescue her. The stunt became so elaborate, it drew unwanted government attention. It provoked an angry letter from President Woodrow Wilson's administration imploring Reichenbach to cease these antics. Context and motivation. The idea was to generate front-page drama around a starlet's disappearance and heroic recovery, thus publicizing the film as a sensational event. Public reaction. Initially, news of a star's abduction would have caused alarm and massive press coverage, exactly as intended, until the truth emerged. But getting the U.S. government involved was not part of the plan. It indicated the stunt had gone too far. Long-term impact. This hoax damaged trust and highlighted the ethical limits of publicity stunts. Reichenbach, chastened by the presidential rebuke, had to rein in his methods. The incident became Hollywood lore, illustrating how early PR agents walked a fine line between clever promotion and outright fraud.